here at the Worcestershire LEP office, here with Claire Hill. Claire's an HR consultant, been really helping lots of small businesses across the county and the region in terms of HR advice and support. I think what we're kind of here just to discuss is kind of, where our business is. Obviously at the moment we seem to be getting updates all the time, and how are you kind of finding it in terms of advice and people coming to you?
Well, as you can imagine, it's extremely busy. We're having to be very reactive about how we are supporting clients at the moment. A lot of questions about how can I do things, am I allowed to do things. I wouldn't say we're in panic mode, but certainly businesses are really starting to plan. They're having contingency plans in place, and they're really starting to kind of take things really seriously in line with government guidelines.
Okay, that's really helpful. And I think that contingency planning bit is sort of the feeling of where I get a sense of many businesses are. What are some of the things they can do in terms of around staffing, and what sort of couple of things would you say look out for?
So contingency planning is going to be absolutely vital now, not just in terms of HR and employment, but in terms of the whole business. But staying with HR and employment, that's going to be very much how I'm looking at advising my clients, is doing it in phases. So starting with a phase that we are at the moment. So it could be that your business isn't really suffering at the moment, you're not really seeing any changes, but having that plan in place as it happens, to the final phase, which might be I've got to close my business, I have no more business, and my staff need to go. So it's having those phases, and then being flexible enough within those phases to keep up with what's going on in line with the government guidelines. So we're starting at the moment looking at what can I do with my staff, what am I legally allowed to do, because even though all this is happening, we still have employment law, which you can't obviously get around employment law. So you still have to adhere to employment law, but it's what can I do to also keep up with what's changing in the business. So we're looking at things like, at the moment, advising on what's in the staff contracts and employment. So first of all, what
contracts are really key then.
What are you legally allowed to do? So when we start talking about things like layoff and short time working, you can only do that if you've got a contractual clause, something in the contract that says you can do that.
Okay, so it's definitely those employment contracts piece is really important.
Absolutely, yeah. And unfortunately, because we've moved on in society, things like layoff clauses and short time working don't tend to be in our contracts anymore, because we no longer need them. So many contracts don't have them. So if you don't have them, then we're then getting into a stage of actually consulting with your staff.
Okay, so it is really a conversation at this time. Obviously, we've got a mixed team even here, and people are kind of, thinking about family members, and do I need to self-isolate, and all those kind of things. But it really is about that early conversation.
Absolutely, and I think even now, at the start of the contingency planning, this is about communicating and engaging with your team, with your staff, letting them know what your contingency plan is. If you've got policies, let them see the policy. So if you've written a coronavirus policy, let them see that, so they know what the company is going to do. But just ask them how they think this could work. Ask for them for their ideas. We know at the moment from last night that the Prime Minister is now urging all those that can work from home should work from home. So it's how is that going to work in your business? You should be looking at your technology, how you're going to communicate with staff who are working remotely to make sure they're safe, that they're happy, and they don't feel isolated at home.
Because it's very difficult to get that home working balance right.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
So I think that's something that we're certainly going to be looking at, even a small team here, in terms of how do we make sure if people are working from home that we've still got good communication.
Absolutely, yes.
And packages of work that then can be done and understood, and so there's not a kind of feeling of they're sat at home but they're not doing what we want to do.
Absolutely, yeah. And so they still feel part of the company, they still feel part of what's going on. So you might want to use things like Zoom or Slack or some kind of video conferencing that the team can still get together and can still discuss, have team meetings as they would if they were sitting next to each other.
And I suppose that's especially the case where you've got some staff who have to be in because that keeps the operation going. Some staff who actually can work from home, and that balance is a real trick.
Yes, and I think when you're looking at that group of staff, it's going to be around, first of all, looking at who are your more vulnerable at-risk staff. So who might have underlying medical conditions, women who are pregnant, I mean, they might be the first group of staff that you may ask to work from home to keep them safe.
Okay, so what happens if the government announces that schools are going to close?
So it's likely, if we have that announcement, it's going to happen with very little notice. So I think employers, first of all, need to be quite flexible about this, and hopefully within their contingency planning, they've already planned for this event to happen. So initially, parents can use time off for dependence leave. So that is a statutory right. It's unpaid, although employers can pay it at their discretion. But it's usually only up to about 2 days, and that just allows for parents to make alternative arrangements. So looking after their children, not actually looking after them themselves. So it's very likely in this situation that won't be enough time off for parents. After that, we're looking at things like annual leave, unpaid leave, anything else that can be used before we start looking at other arrangements. Once that's exhausted, we possibly were looking at working from home, as we talked about before. Could parents work from home? It is not going to be easy because they're going to have children around them at home. So, of course, it's taking that into account, depending on the age of the child. But that might work. If that's not a possibility, then we're looking into things like temporary reduction to their hours. And again, if there's no contractual right to do that, again, it's a conversation with the employee seeking their consent in order to do that.
So it really is that conversation between the employer and employee.
Absolutely.
And we can see that some of the home working piece, setting up those kind of rules and understanding, because they're very difficult, how parents then manage those children and work with them, because obviously, young children in particular are very demanding.
That's right, yes.
My own kids, I don't think I've got 20 minutes to kind of sit down and sort of get myself straight. So, those are the things that I think are real kind of practical differences and challenges of how we're going to have to work through.
There is something called parental leave. Again, this is a statutory right for staff with 1 year's continuous service, when they can take up to 18 weeks leave. And again, this is unpaid. There does have to be 21 days notice before you can take it, but hopefully again with the flexibility that we're going to be asking from employers, they might waive quite a lot of that notice. So again, that's absolutely. So that's something, a right that is available if it's needed.
Okay, and certainly something where we need to keep an eye on what the government advice is, not just announcing the school bit, but actually how the rest of it organises, and how employers and employees work together to make this a smooth transition.
Absolutely, yes.
The budget last week on the 11th of March really started to outline some of the sick pay pieces, but obviously once an employee gets the illness and that's confirmed, how does sick pay work for them? Okay,
so if we just recap where we are with sick pay. So we know that coronavirus aside, sick pay usually starts on day 4 of somebody's absence. So days 1 to 3 is unpaid, day 4 is when sick pay starts. So the government have put in a temporary amendment to that, so that sick pay will now, for coronavirus related issues, will now start from day 1. So from day 1 you'll be able to claim SSP.
Okay.
This is something obviously the employer pays, so it's not something the government pays, but what the government has also done is allowed employers to claim it back for the first 14 days. So they will be able to claim some of it back.
And that would be through their kind of returns?
Yes,
anyway.
Exactly, yes. We're going to see a lot more staff on statutory sick pay, mainly because we're not just talking about those who have contracted the virus, but we're talking about those who have gone into self-isolation as well. Again, we know that staff who are off sick need some medical evidence after day 7. That will be a sick note from their GP. And again, the government are now saying, in order not to visit GP surgeries and not to use the NHS 111 line too much, they're actually going to waive the need for the documentary evidence unless employers absolutely want it. And in that case, they can go online at NHS 111 and they're asked some questions, and then they're given a certificate or an alternative to the GP certificate.
I think that's a really important point at this stage, because obviously what we don't want to do is be sending people to GPs 111. Clearly you can see from the government guidance, it is trying to take as much pressure off the NHS as possible.
Yes, absolutely.
So again, I think it is about that kind of employer relationship really,
Yes.
and about saying, well, normally we would want this, but in these circumstances.
Yes, absolutely. And if staff are displaying any symptoms, that'll be enough for them to go into self-isolation and to claim statutory sick pay.
Okay, so that's helpful from those kind of, and really clear, I think, for again how employers really manage this bit of the programme.
Yeah, absolutely. What the government and ACAS are advising as best practice is that if there is any doubt, then to pay statutory sick pay. So if there's any symptoms, even if it doesn't end up being coronavirus, but if they're going into self-isolation because they can't come to work, because they have symptoms, then that's enough to pay statutory sick pay.
So there's a lot of information there, and I think so where employers will need is, what there are some key points which you might want to reiterate, but also that gov.uk website is really the place to go.
Yes, absolutely. Gov.uk is constantly being updated, and it's got a dedicated area for COVID-19 inquiries and lots of information on what you should do. Public Health England also have, and if it's particularly employment related, of course we've got ACAS as well,
Brilliant.
who are all the time updating their website.
Yeah, and certainly places like the LEP and Worcester Business Central are using that information to kind of feed their info as well.
Absolutely.